it would probably be a gold standard at this point in our history, because that's the thing we understand. Humanity has basically been on a gold standard on and off for several hundred years. And if you want to just go back to when gold was just money and that was all there is to it, 3,000 years. So it's possible that we do something like that, where we just say, look, this clearly isn't working and we need to do something else. So let's sit down and let's figure out how to go back to something like the classical gold standard when things basically work. Now, that doesn't mean that's a pain-free transition, because all the people who have cash and government bonds end up seeing their savings be diminished, because you can't go back to a gold standard from here without a big devaluation of the dollar.
It may seem improbable, but the global financial system is beginning to pivot toward a gold-based monetary framework. This shift comes despite economists and financial officials widely critiquing the historical gold standard. Yet, as crises mount, the allure of gold as a monetary foundation grows stronger, underpinned by its proven track record. Financial commentator John Rubino advocates for a proactive response to current monetary challenges by transitioning to a new system. He suggests that the gold standard, a historically stable economic framework, could be a viable solution, as gold has provided trust and stability that modern fiat currencies often lack. Contrary to widespread misconceptions, the gold standard has demonstrated remarkable effectiveness. The United States operated under a gold-backed system for 180 years until the early 1970s. Inflation was virtually non-existent, and the U.S. experienced unparalleled economic growth. However, severing the dollar's link to gold marked a turning point. Since then, average economic growth rates have dropped by about a third. According to estimates, if the historic growth pattern had continued, median household income today would be at least $40,000 higher. Despite these facts, skepticism toward a gold-based monetary system remains pervasive. Critics often dismiss the model as outdated or impractical, ignoring its historical success. Yet, growing geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainties are forcing many nations to reconsider. Central banks worldwide are amassing gold reserves to reduce reliance on Western financial systems. The rationale is clear. The US dollar is no longer seen as invulnerable. Recent sanctions and geopolitical risks have underscored the need for alternative safeguards. Rubino acknowledges that transitioning back to a gold standard would be challenging. Such a move would necessitate significant devaluation of currencies like the dollar and euro. This in turn would hurt those holding cash and government bonds, potentially leading to civil unrest and political instability. Make sure to tune in for our expert analysis. Don't miss out on future content. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Well, the unwise way to address something like this is just to let it metastasize until the crisis is so horrendous that basically people are willing to accept anything from the government in return for the bleeding stopping, and that's historically, that's how it goes most of the time. But what we totally could do is see it coming and just announce a new monetary system. And yeah, it would probably be a gold standard at this point in our history, because that's the thing we understand. Humanity has basically been on a gold standard on and off for several hundred years. And if you want to just go back to when gold was just money and that was all there is to it, 3,000 years. So it's possible that we do something like that, where we just say, look, this clearly isn't working and we need to do something else. So let's sit down and let's figure out how to go back to something like the classical gold standard when things basically work. Now, that doesn't mean that's a pain-free transition, because all the people who have cash and government bonds end up seeing their savings be diminished, because you can't go back to a gold standard from here without a big devaluation of the dollar and the euro and the yen. This is probably going to be a worldwide thing when it happens. And so the people that trust the government are hurt badly by this, and probably they take to the streets. Probably there's civil unrest. Probably there's a lot of political turmoil. So it's not an easy thing to get through, but it is something that we could get through without having a dictatorship. We just accept the pain. We do what we can to moderate it, and 3 or 4 or 5 years in, We've got a stable currency. We've got a monetary system that looks like it can exist and grow organically over time. And then we're back on a sustainable path. But it won't be painless. It'll just be less painful in the long run than the alternatives. And that when you screw up on the scale that we've screwed up, minimizing the pain rather than eliminating it is all you can hope for.
As debates over economic policy continue, it's crucial to distinguish between perceived threats and real dangers. While much attention has been given to the U.S. trade deficit, particularly under former President Donald Trump's administration, experts argue that the federal budget deficit poses a greater risk to the nation's long-term growth and prosperity. Trump's focus on reducing the trade deficit through tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China was mainly about asserting political leverage. His stance was rooted in the belief that trade deficits hurt the economy very badly. However, this perspective is fundamentally flawed. Trade deficits are not inherently harmful to economic growth. They often reflect consumer demand and global supply chains. Conversely, the federal budget deficit is a pressing issue threatening financial stability. In this context, recent data underscores the severity of the problem. The U.S. reported a record-breaking 2-month deficit at the start of fiscal 2025, despite favorable economic conditions such as record-high equity markets, low unemployment, and substantial tax revenues. Yet, spending has outpaced revenues at an alarming rate, putting the annual deficit on track to reach an unprecedented $3 to $4 trillion. Let's get back to the interview.
Well, I think the entrenched aristocracy or the deep state or the oligarchy, whatever you want to call it, that's in, or the uniparty, whatever you want to call the guys who have been in charge for the last 40 years and want to stay in charge, they're clearly willing to do basically anything. I mean, this is, the guys who are in charge now are in the same lineage that as the ones who assassinated JFK, okay? So you can go all the way back to them. And find people in charge who are willing to do basically anything. So yes, ramping up a potential nuclear war with Russia, crazy as that sounds, is something they're actually doing now. They think of it as a negotiating tactic. You aggressively escalate the fighting in order to give yourself the best position for cutting a deal. But we're aggressively escalating the fighting with right on the border and inland. With the world's other nuclear superpower, is that worth another move on the chessboard? See, these guys are playing games. They don't actually seem to understand that they and their children are going to be incinerated in a nuclear war if they get this wrong. And in the financial sphere, it's basically the same thing. We're running massive deficits now. The first 2 months of the U.S. fiscal year was by far the highest deficit for that period of time that the U.S. government has ever run. And remember, we're 15 years into an expansion. We've got equities at all-time highs, which means, we're generating lots of capital gains that the government can tax. Unemployment is near a record low. We've got more people working right now than ever before, which means lots of payroll taxes are flowing into the government. And yet we're running the biggest deficit of all time. We're on track for $3 to $4 trillion deficit if you just extrapolate the first 2 months of fiscal 2025 out, and that is also basically a scam designed to make things harder for the incoming administration. So was it the bird flu that they just declared an state of emergency over in California? Version 2.0 coming, and that's completely within the range of possibility too. If California does it, it's a big chunk of the U.S. right there. And so it can't happen too soon for Kennedy to come in and clear out the people who are potentially running dirty tricks in the guise of national health care. But there's no guarantee that any of this is allowed to happen because there are all kinds of potential false flags that can happen between now and Inauguration Day. And, one of them could be some kind of terrorist attack. Another one could be some kind of geopolitical thing where some war somewhere ramps up dramatically. And there could be financial crises. There could be a gigantic derivatives bust or something like that, engineered by people who don't want Trump to be able to cut the size of the government. So a lot of stuff could happen. And I'm not predicting any one of them, but we're already seeing stuff like that. I mean, ramping up the Ukraine war on the way out the door doesn't make any sense for a president, or declaring a state of emergency in America's biggest state over something that has infected, 27 people or some crazy low number like that, like something that is beneath the notice of a governor in a state normally.
The growing appeal of a gold-based monetary framework reflects increasing concerns about the vulnerabilities of fiat currencies. While transitioning to such a system would require significant adjustments and pose short-term challenges, its historical stability makes it a compelling alternative in uncertain times. Simultaneously, addressing the federal budget deficit remains essential to ensuring economic resilience. These issues highlight the importance of strategic decisions in navigating the complexities of the global financial landscape. What are your thoughts on the potential shift toward a gold-based monetary system and the prioritization of fiscal reforms? Share your perspective in the comments section. If the video resonates with you, join our community by subscribing to our channel and enabling notifications with the bell icon. Thank you for being a part of our community.